Shivika is a very, very special person. So before I start firing questions at her, oh, and by the way, for anyone who's new to one of these calls, this is the format. I'm going to talk to Shivika and ask her a bunch of questions for about 30 minutes. Then we'll open it up for live Q&A. You don't have to actually put your question in the chat. Just let Tom know that you have a question and he'll send me a text and tee me up. And you can ask your question directly to Shivika. But before I start firing questions at her, Tom, get us started. This is Tom's first time doing this, so see what we got. You're on mute, well, you don't look like you're on mute. I don't know, Tom, I can't hear you. Shivika, you're going to have to trust me. We have a killer introduction for you. Now you're on mute.
God, if you need, I could probably call it up and play it.
You want to do it? So this is Mike Perlo's creation. Oh, I might have to make you. Do I have to make you a co-host?
Let me see if I can share my screen. Yeah, I can share my screen. Give me 1 second.
All right.
I just gotta queue it up.
Thank God we have the creator on the call.
Here we go. I think I have it here. Bear with me 1 second.
The anticipation's killing me.
Okay.
It's worth the wait.
Okay, here we go. 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 Here you go, Shivika. I think. Wait a minute, that didn't work. You put me on the spot here. Hang on.
I know.
Okay, hold on. One more time.
Take two.
Sorry.
This is Kathy is gonna love watching this playback. She's gonna say, "What would you do without me?"
A raise.
Yeah, seriously,
Okay.
I'm in trouble.
Here we go. Here we go. Here we go.
Mike Perlo comes through in the clutch. Shivika, was that an introduction worth waiting for?
I mean, can I take you all everywhere? This was the best introduction. You were the
Like
best
your hype
team.
squad.
Exactly, best hype squad.
I am thrilled to have you with us today, and I have a million questions for you. Let's start here. So you have lived all over the world, and you grew up all over the world. So it's one thing to kind of experience the world as an adult. It's a different thing, I think, to grow up in all kinds of different environments. Tell us a little bit about what are some of the important things that you learned, the lessons that you learned from growing up in so many diverse cultures.
Yeah, I think so. First of all, I just want to say thank you again for having me here. It's just an incredible project. Scott, I just love what you guys are building. And I'm just really honored to be, I see the term legend series and I think, whoa, hang on, that's amazing. And so thank you so much for all of, all of the warmth and the lovely introduction. And I'm really, really excited for this conversation with all you incredible individuals. And I think it's each of us are legends in our own right. And thank you for bringing us all together, Scott. I think if having grown up all over the world, I think there are three things that I think I've learned in my adult life differently and very viscerally. One is that we are all truly connected. The kid that wants a piece of chocolate in Vietnam, Zimbabwe, the United States, London, the experiences are all the same. Human emotion knows no difference. And really on a visceral level, we truly are one and we truly are connected. And so I want to share that especially with everything that's happening in the world today, Ukraine and the Middle East, no matter what our politics are, I feel, and I read the news, I think very differently, and the level of compassion for sort of what people's experiences are as a human race. Two, I think we are all the same and we are all connected. We are far more connected than we realize. I grew up in some of the poorest parts of the world, and I got to see firsthand. My father was a diplomat who was responsible for developing underdeveloped economies. And I got to see firsthand the impact of multinational businesses, Unilever, Pepsi, Coke, on the local communities. I got to see social entrepreneurs build businesses that directly impact a global supply chain and lift people out of poverty. And so I think we become disconnected from the world despite our, intertwined global trade. I go to the store and I buy a piece of chocolate. I'm completely disconnected from the supply chain, from the cacao farmer in West Africa, to the cacao supplier, to the middleman, to the manufacturers, to the people who work on the factory floor, all the way to the packaging, right? There's a very intricate supply chain behind that. And I think we've become disconnected to it. I go to the store, I buy my chocolate, I leave, I talk to the cashier, and that's it. And I think we forget how much of an impact our small decisions on the day-to-day basis can be, whether it's purchases, whether it's our, where we donate and the behaviors that we have. We are truly way more connected in today's day and age than we realize. And then, I think growing up, I understood very quickly with the lack of, I think a lot of us growing up, we derive our identity from the cultures around us. And when the culture remains stable, our identities sort of flourish and grow. And people who grew up all over the world, and this is well studied by now, they tend to have a delayed adolescence, because in those formative teenage years, there is no stable culture by which to base your identity and your values off of. So at a very young age, I had to determine who I was, void of the culture I was in. Of course, I had a home culture, we are South Asian, but that took me on a path to study philosophy, world religions. I read the Bible, I read the Quran as much as I could. I read the Bhagavad Gita. I went on this search of what exists from an idea standpoint and what is truly mine. And so building your identity void of culture was an entirely different experience than I think some people may have later in life. I had at a very, very young age.
And, so it's no wonder that you see things globally. And it's brought you to this place, and you talk so beautifully about conscious consumerism. And I think, there's these terms that get thrown around: social entrepreneur, conscious consumerism, but I'm not sure that we all know, like, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, basically conscious consumption is supporting goods and services that have a social and environmental component within their business model. So in order to function, they do good. And it is just part of creating that vehicle of business. Very separate from charity, which charity can sometimes be a byproduct of trade and business. This is really intertwining into that global solution. I truly think it's one of the fulcrums left as we think about uplifting people out of poverty. We think about climate change and the grand issues and challenges of our time. There is a system of trade that exists that has the possibility to uplift across the world. And I think that is a really underutilized resource.
Why has, dedicating your life to being a social entrepreneur, why is that mission so important to you?
Yeah, it's a really good question. There's two parts to this. I was probably 20 something. I'm sitting in Delhi. The night sky is bright, and my grandfather and I are talking about space and the cosmos and our place in it. And it was his final years. And I asked him he's 90 something, what advice would you give to people like me at that time, starting in my career? And he said, never wait until you're rich enough or you have enough time to be of use. And that really stuck with me. And that's where I pivoted my career to think about how can I use everything I'd learned in my 10 plus years in marketing, in retail, e-commerce to be of use, and ended up becoming involved with the United Nations and met some amazing social entrepreneurs and found the right fit there. So that's one reason why it was important to me on a personal reason. This was one of the last messages my grandfather left me with. And two, I think I've been very fortunate to have a front row seat, whether it was my father's work in developing nations, my uncle who dedicated his life to uplifting people out of poverty. I've had a front row seat to the fact that you can have incredible careers and do good. And the two are not mutually exclusive. You don't need to go and earn a great living and raise families off of values that you really care about. There's enough space in this world for careers like that. And the third thing is that I had seen this growing up. I had visited multinational corporate factories that had clear social responsibility missions and those that didn't. And I had seen the difference and the impact that they had on local communities. I realized at some point in my career, the work that I was doing was in exact conflict to the things I had seen growing up.
So Shivika worked for companies like Alex and Annie and The Gap and Oscar de la Renta. And then when you started Venica, you kind of were on a mission to, I'll call it, fix fashion. Talk about the link between fashion and climate change, exploitation of women, and all those things that you've spent so much time thinking about and trying to fix through the work that you've done.
Absolutely. And fashion is a great example of our interconnected global system and how little I think we realize of an impact, how little I think we realize we're connected and how great of an impact that we have. Fashion is among the top 5 contributors to climate change. It is the second greatest polluter of Earth's freshwater supply. It is the single greatest exploiter of women, particularly working women. About 80% of garment workers live in developing nations, aged 18 to 35, often supporting whole families through the wages that they earn. And many of the wages that they earn are below a livable wage. Fashion is responsible for 10% of global carbon emissions. So really everything from the textiles that go into a piece of cloth, to the person who sewed your buttons, to how that was packaged and put on a ship, to the global emissions of transporting that particular item. We cannot fix climate change until we fix fashion. And that's one of the key industries right up there with meat and livestock and the automotive industry that need to completely overturn.
It's so fascinating. I had spent a few weeks back, I had spent a bunch of time with a good friend of mine, Siavata Adare, and she was voted the #1 chocolatier in the country and has won all these awards. And, talking to her about the cacao trade and West Africa, where, she will not buy any product there, and just understanding all the slave labor and all the components. It's just fascinating to talk to somebody that has such a broad perspective, and how passionate she is about fair trade and things like that.
Completely. It's estimated that over 3 million children are unfairly employed by cacao farmers in Western Africa. And that's why a simple thing like going to the grocery store and looking for a fair trade certified piece of chocolate versus a non-fair trade certified piece of to me, it's, I think the differences are now between 50 cents to $1. But when you look at the downstream impact from a human dignity and an environmental standpoint, it's huge. It's way beyond my $1 difference, right? Same thing with coffee, and the same thing with fashion. Fair trade certified fashion versus not. So I think that's a great example of the simple decisions that we make on a daily basis. We truly are far more connected that we can imagine, and they have an effect.
So I think a lot of people think, buying a chocolate bar or buying a fair trade coffee, like that's a drop in the bucket. But you talk about, and I'm probably saying it wrong, but repeatability and how that kind of plays an impact, and that it's not just, a little drop in the ocean.
Completely. One of the big arguments against conscious consumption is that, hang on, if I buy this fair trade cup of coffee once, am I really making an impact? And the truth is, probably not. What really happens is when you commit to constantly buying that day, your daily cup of coffee, day over day, over time, you'll inspire at least 1 to 2 people to make the same change. Over a 10-year difference, that ripple effect is huge. The Scientific American published a study saying that if everyone in the United States, for every 4th time we eat meat, change that 4th time into a vegetarian-based protein, a lentil or tofu or so forth, we would essentially cut global carbon emissions by more than 1%. So now the 1% number doesn't seem like a lot, but when you're looking at global carbon emissions, that goes a long way in supporting rainforest reforestation, in supporting clean water, in our climate issues. And that's a very simple change, right? So when we really want to think of it as a movement, and it starts with each of us, right? And then it goes on as we inspire others. And these end up being mass planetary scale changes.
What trends are you seeing now in terms of conscious consumerism?
Yeah, oh my gosh. So really the vegetarian and sort of clean plant-based lifestyle, it's good for us, it's good for the planet. I'm definitely seeing that taking off. And this stat around for every 4th time we choose to eat meat, we choose a plant-based option, we're essentially over our lifetime cutting our carbon emission by 25%. So that I think has really taken shape in a really powerful form. I think fashion is at a cusp of change too. I'm really seeing just a lot more awareness about sustainable fashion and brands becoming more mainstream. And finally, I think the third piece is just around electric vehicles. Electric vehicles are now no longer just the Teslas of the world. Every company has them. India has just launched their sort of electrical vehicle movement. And I think globally it's really taking off.
I've heard you talk about finding purpose, and it's interesting. So I think individually we need to find purpose, but I think purpose and impact is also changing companies. And I think we're entering into kind of a new world where that's going to be really, really important, that, marketers within companies are able to articulate, the true purpose and impact that they have. What are you seeing there?
Completely. I think we're seeing a grand shift to purpose, both on the corporate level and the personal level. If you think about 50, 60 years ago, the P word, purpose, wasn't thrown around in our culture and our nomenclature as much. And I think this young generation is really driving organizations to have some sort of impact. It's hard now to be a consumer-focused startup and not have a cause. It just doesn't work. And this was sort of a yesteryear approach to consumer businesses. When I look at, those in this, whether it's supplement space, whether it's handbags, whether it's whatever that's coming up, they all have either a give back component, they work with a charity, they have some sort of aspect of purpose, which is amazing. And I think personally, we have more choice than ever before. And with that choice, we look at, well, what do I want to spend my time doing? What do I want my life to mean? What are the purpose do I seek for myself and for others? And I think that's purpose has been just a really powerful byproduct of the last, I think, 2-3 decades.
When people, Tom's was probably an early example of a company that was buy one, give one, and then Bombas and others. But as that becomes vogue, how do we as consumers understand which companies are like the real deal and which ones are just kind of jumping on this bandwagon, but really uh, not doing it for reasons other than profit?
Completely great question. I'd say one, I don't be afraid to believe companies, right? If they're not talking about it on their website, if they don't have any information about what their supply chain responsibility is or what they care about, they don't care about anything. So that's one. Two, certifications are really powerful. So Reformation is a clothing brand that's climate neutral certified. There are beauty companies out there that are climate neutral certified. It's really hard to get these certifications. So fair trade, climate neutral, 1% of the planet, B Corp, these are some really popular mainstream certifications. And I'd say believe them because they're difficult to actually get, despite some of the media that's out there. And then finally, just I think if any brand is doing good, they're going to talk about it and they're going to make it really easy to find. So look for that and believe them. And I would say perfection, not, look for progress, not perfection. Like it's okay if this company, is 80% there. And that, support them. It's all about progress, not perfection for our own habits and for this movement in corporate America.
Yeah. And I heard you talk about Starbucks as being an example of, really doing some great things. And I think, people, especially with large corporations like a Starbucks, people could tear them apart because they could find something to complain about. But I think, you did a nice job of highlighting, really what they're doing on the fair trade side.
Completely. They were a company that were first to the game. They didn't need to be. There was no consumer pressure around it. Consumers didn't even care. And they went ahead and said, you know what, we're going to be fair trade certified and we're going to look at our entire supply chain and fix it because we can. And I think that's really powerful. I think when we do it as individuals, it's powerful. And I think as a corporation, I will forever be a fan for the Patagonias, the Starbucks, the Toms, the real early adopters.
Yeah, amazing. We had Hap Klopp on, who's 81 years old. He was the founder of North Face, and he talked about his triple bottom line, and just amazing that he was doing things in 1968 that are not even done today. Just incredible. Oh, go ahead.
No, yeah, I was just going to say it really is, and I think there's this quote from Roosevelt about the man in the arena, that it is easy to mock, it is easy to, to criticize, but really those are done by the spectators, right? It is the person in the arena that is fighting the battle that deserves the applause and the praise. And so if you're in the arena and you're making progress, then hats off, and I think consumers should support them unabashedly versus the spectators who are the analyzers and the criticizers, right? It's much harder to be in the arena, to be playing that game.
I heard you say something really interesting. And this was in regards to something that shaped your career. You said that work is an honor and a privilege. And I don't hear a lot of people talking about work as being an honor and a privilege. Where do those feelings come from?
Yeah, well, let's look at the globe, right? The fact that everyone here in this chat is top 10%, right? We don't struggle for where our next meal comes from. We don't live under exploitative conditions. We don't live under conditions of war. We were all educated and received great education, right? So when we start there, we're already in the 10%, right? The fact that then we get the choice and so most people don't get to choose the work that they do. They were born into situations where their work was dictated to them, their options are limited. My father was a taxi driver. I live in this poor neighborhood of X. We have limited opportunity, so I will probably be a taxi driver. This is the story of like at least half the world's population, right? So everyone here, when you have a privilege, I think when you have a choice of the work that you do, it is an honor and a privilege to go and exercise that choice every single day. And so to choose your profession, to choose your career path, to choose the people that you work with, to choose, the new job at Stanford, that is a 1% level of privilege that just most of the world's population, billions of people, do not have. And so I think work is an honor and it is privilege. And there is on a second side of that, there is a concept in Hinduism called dharma, which is duty. And duty is as sacred. Duty and dharma is a path to God, to divinity within yourself, essentially, whoever your God is. But really, it's meant to be a path to ultimate divinity and self-actualization. And work is a path to that. So you go and you do your duty. You've chosen your duty, which is an honor and a privilege. And then it is a further privilege to be able to do one's duty to the best of one's ability without attachment to the outcome of that duty. That is how you self-actualize yourself and grow and elevate your own self. And so I think work is a powerful privilege and an honor and a vehicle for self and personal growth.
I love that, because this community is all built around people that don't have a victim mindset and aren't and see things in a very similar light. So I love the way you articulated that. So I'm going to take a little bit of a left-hand turn here before I open it up for questions. You wrote probably one of my favorite chapters in the 4 Standing O books that I put together. You wrote an incredible chapter in Standing O Tribute about your dad. So tell us a little bit about bare knuckle push-ups on concrete and punching trees.
Yeah, my father, it still is one of the world masters in martial arts. He's black belt and he's like 5th dan, and he started training at the age of 18. He's 71 right now. Because of racial abuse in London at the time. And so what started as this self-defense, necessity turned into one of the greatest loves of his life and the greatest loves of our life. And he first of all, they had 3 girls and moving country to country. And they said, there's going to be no difference in the way we raise our girls versus if we had boys. And so I'm going to train you to become disciplined martial artists. And I'm going to train you both in the act and the philosophy of martial arts. And so we were, I think 13, and, bare knuckle push-ups in the driveway on concrete. We are punching trees till our knuckles bruise. My father is saying, look, in the arena, I am your sensei, not your father. And so there was a complete delineation of that. And we learned the discipline and the art of martial arts. And we learned the philosophy around it. So Bushido, the way of the warrior, essentially. And that is what he taught us. And both my parents really taught us by how they lived their lives. There was nothing that they said. And so the tenets of that, I learned to meditate at the age of 16. That was my first exposure. So this idea of discipline, of strength, of continuing on through suffering and embracing suffering, right? Like, I'm 13 years old. It is in Southern Africa. It is 10,000 degrees outside, but I need to do my 50 on the driveway, right? Like, that kind of grit has taken us through, I think, an entire life. And it has taught me I've never seen myself as different or less capable than anyone else. There's nothing on this earth that I cannot learn, figure out, do, and if I chose to excel at, that I couldn't excel at. Literally, I had, and I have that because, and I say that without ego, simply because I know I will work hard enough to get to what I choose to do and be.
One of the things that impressed me about you, I remember our first conversation, and I called a colleague and I'm like, oh my God, like, she is unbelievable. And part of that was your resiliency. Just the things that you've overcome are amazing. And you know, I'm out of my time, so we may have to do a part two to get to some of those other things. But yeah, I remember that distinctly from our first conversation many years ago. Uh, Shivika, we have a ton of people that want to ask you questions, a ton. So I'm going to open it up. And I think we're going first to Paul in Florida. Paul, you are up with Shivika.
Oh, first, I just want to say, Scott, so great to see you again. And Shivika, thank you so much for your time. You talked about this idea of building your identity regardless of the culture, and you've been all over the world. And I'm curious, right? Because for me, I see the biggest challenge that we have now, especially because of social media, is we're really questioning kind of what's real anymore. So I'm curious for you, like, could you share maybe some insight how that's kind of helped you really able to do that, and how you don't let like a lot of the noise and things that you hear affect you?
Yeah, that's a really, my gosh, how much time do we have? I have learned that there is nothing real except the laws of physics that existed within the first 3 seconds of the creation of the universe, right? Like gravity is real. There's certain minerals that are real. Science is real. Everything else is a social construct, and everything else is story. So in Sapiens, Yuval Harari has a great concept that humans are the greatest storytellers. We've literally told our stories in a way that have created corporations and banks and trade systems. And these were all communicated stories that from our imagination, that human beings, everything you look at around you was created by the imagination of some human at some point, right? And so we are the ultimate story takers. So that used to scare me as a kid. It certainly doesn't anymore, because you choose your story. You choose the story about who you are and what you believe in. And yes, and social media is just basically an amplification of that. We have more stories to choose from. But ultimately, the story that you tell yourself about who you are, what you stand for, what you're capable of, is the only truth that you really have. The other thing I would say is when we look at, like, I think socially we have this concept of, on a morality scale, perfection versus not. The perfect employee, the perfect career, the perfect mother, the perfect school, the perfect wife, the perfect husband, the perfect climber, right? And we think of perfection as, on a moral scale, good versus not. You're less than perfect, so you're less than good. I think we need to flip that. Perfect is nothing but a very narrowly constructed set of values and norms. That's it. And not perfect is simply a larger set of what is acceptable and norm. So rather than perfection, I think about greatness, living a great life and not a perfect life. A perfect life is narrow. A great life is wide, right? So if you think about the great stories that are true for you and the values that are true for you, that's where, if you blow open this concept of what is perfect and what is right socially, you think, oh, there's just A, much more available to me, and B, who are you as an individual? And that's where your own introspective journey and your meditation and your inner voice comes into play. So I've gone on and on, but I think there's a great life. And what does a great life look for each of us? That's very different, right? Whereas a perfect life pretty much looks the same because we have that narrowly constructed set of views. So I think when we blow ourselves up to greatness, our stories are entirely different. And the great freedom is that everything is a story or a construct in some way anyway. So you choose your story.
There were a couple mic drop moments in there. Yeah, so we as a community, we have this saying that anybody can be ordinary, but we all have the power to choose to be extraordinary. But everybody's extraordinary looks different. And I love the way you answered that question. Bruce in Oregon, you're up.
And Shivika, thank you so much for spending time with us. We're all just loving this. So I'm curious to get your opinion of where you think we're headed in terms of retail versus e-tail. You know, we see these large retailers that are filing for bankruptcy. Some of them are completely going out of business. Many others are restructuring, they're shrinking. We're seeing kind of that delicate balance in the ecosystem between retail and e-tail, and trying to have some kind of a hybrid for success. Where do you see this going in terms of the brick and mortar versus the digital push and pull?
Yeah, great question. I think part of what's happening is the barrier to entry in the last 10 years to do business has decreased significantly. And so these big conglomerates, Victoria's Secret as an example, you're seeing thousands of competitors come in the space. And I think death by 1,000 cuts, particularly since e-tailing, the barriers to that have come down, are one. Two, what a company looks like today, from needing to have purpose to the kind of branding and the kind of inclusivity that you need to have to sort of be more interesting to a younger audience, looks very different. I think what we'll start to see is sort of what we've seen with some of, like, Bonobos is a great example of this, where it begins with an environment that is e-commerce and then uses retail to support its growth, whether that's from a showrooming standpoint, carrying fewer pieces of inventory, but really using it as a showroom and a trial experience, to going, adding on customer service pieces that are just simply not available online. So I think we're going to see stores completely reshape and rethink themselves. I also think we're going to see influx of technology in stores. I think you can go in and have an AI avatar and look at your mirror and see your outfit or whatever it is in different experiences. I think in the chocolate space, you can probably track supply chain. I think there's like a experience point of view to stores. So really going past the we sell things to what do customers experience when they enter us, and why is it worth their time, kind of thinking. So I think I think we're going to see the role of stores change to be supportive to businesses, and also thinking from like a clienteling perspective, customer experience and what they're adding, I think will be key in the future.
Thank you so much for that insightful answer.
A little bit of a master class there. We're going to Connecticut. Jeff Gamble, I call him Gampy. You can call him Jeff or Gampy.
You can call me Gampy all day long. Thank you, Scott. Shivika. Hello, welcome. Nice to know that you're close by in New York for us. So Shivika, my question is, you've talked about several industries, and along the lines of disruption, being a disruptor, what industry, product, service, do you feel hasn't been disrupted yet and needs to be? And if you could give us an example, perhaps, what do you think needs to be done in a general sense for that industry?
Yeah, I'd say that's a great question. Two things. I think the cell phone industry is ripe for disruption. When technologists study the disruption cycle, it tends to be on a 10 to 15-year basis, which means that the smartphone, really the iPhone now at any point, is due for disruption. I think we're starting to see that with not virtual reality, but augmented reality. iOS vision is a great example of computing basically becoming 3D and into the sort of real dimensional world. I think we're going to start to see that with the cell phone. I don't know what the next iteration looks like, but I know that the iPhone experience is certainly up for disruption. I think the big piece is also going to be, I think AI, I see Thomas, you've said that. Yeah. So I think AI is going to completely disrupt every industry and basically every job. I think the large language learning models that we're seeing right now, whether it's, ChatGPT and so forth, they're just sort of disrupting content, but that's just the beginning. We're going to have machine learning, algorithmic based decisions available to anyone within seconds, where you input your information and you get, here's the probability outcomes. That's going to be the next level of AI disruption. And that's scary, because when you think about human thinking and decisioning, it's going to completely disrupt how we do that. I would say the third one is decarbonization. So in order to get to where we need to on a planetary scale of carbon, we need to both reduce the amount of carbon we release, but we also need to take out carbon from the atmosphere. And so we're starting to see a brand new space essentially being created, whether there's companies taking carbon and turning it into diamonds, I've seen carbon removal technologies at the ocean level. I think that's going to be a piece of technology that becomes mainstream over the next 10 to 15 years. And these are going to be the new investments that we're all going to want to get in on in the next wave of venture capital.
That's great. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Awesome. We're going to Iowa. Dave, you're up.
Hi, Shivika. I don't have a question, but I have a statement because there's so many things that you mentioned today that I could relate with. I'm fortunate to be in the top 10% that you talk about, and a bunch of us here are grateful to be in that position. But I could also relate so much to the people that are not as fortunate and the people that didn't have the choice in their life to do X, Y, and Z. So my paternal grandmother was born in North Korea, and right at the start of World War, or the Korean War, she had to make a decision. And you talk about small decisions making a big impact down the line. And so her decision was to hop on a train that she was not supposed to be on. And that train went from North Korea, Pyongyang area, all the way to South Korea. And she hopped on the train and held on for dear life as it was coming down. Before that process, she was separated from her boyfriend. And then her boyfriend also magically was able to escape North Korea, and they reunited somehow, got married, and obviously down the line, I'm here because of that, right? And so those small decisions can really make huge decisions or a huge impact down the line, the ripple effect that you talk about. So that was my maternal grandma. My paternal grandma was in South Korea, and when the North was attacking, she had to escape with 2 young toddlers on foot about 150 miles down to the southern tip of the border. And so her decision to escape so she doesn't get killed was also like a small decision, but it just made a huge impact generations down the line. So I could relate to where you're coming from and like all the stories that you shared. So I just really appreciate you for sharing that.
Completely. I mean, look, we get to decide after this. I assume we're in the middle of work day. Some of us have work to do. We turn on the faucet, we have running hot water. We've got fridge full of food. We are the top 10%, right? 7-8 billion people. We are literally top 10% of the population. So it is, that's certainly not lost on me. And I think that's a really powerful story, how A, things can change in 1 to 2 generations, but B, it's not guaranteed. This was not a given. We were born into these situations, and, someone who took a lucky train ride and so forth. And I have certainly stories on my side around partition and war as well. And so it's not lost on me that this is a fluke of an existence, and a very lucky one is that.
Yeah, it just motivates me to make the small decisions today, because a couple of generations down the line, they could be thanking me or looking back on what I did today for what's happening down the line. So
Totally.
Thank you so much.
Right? Exactly, right? When I want to be able to look at my grandkids and say, here's what we did in the climate crisis. Here's what here are the small decisions we made, and so absolutely.
We're going to London to our favorite actress, Isabel. You're up. Oh, you're on mute.
Great start. Hi, Shivika. Hi. Lovely to meet you. A real pleasure. Thank you so much. So it's a build on 2 things. One is your beautiful quote from your grandfather, which really just is still buzzing in my heart, really, that quote. And so you mentioned you were in your 20s when he shared that gem with you. And my question is slightly linked to the answer you just gave as well, which is, as a child, when was the moment that you were woken up to this almost clairvoyance, really, that you clearly have around what you're now doing and pursuing, and the vision that you have, and the way that you speak about it? I've never heard anyone articulate it like you do. Did you have a moment as a child where something happened, or was it accumulative?
That's such an interesting question. Thank you. I'd say there wasn't a single moment, and there still isn't a single moment. It's an evolving process till today and every day. And that changes, and it will for all of us over the course of a lifetime, right? I think it comes from going, hang on, I just have this nagging feeling I'm not where I'm supposed to be, or I'm not doing what I'm supposed to do. And it's usually a very small voice that you kind of push off the back of your head and you head to your next meeting, right? And so it's part of it is that, and then sometimes it's a loud yelling, like, what are you doing? Right. And so it's just paying attention, and I think it evolves. So I think it changes and evolves, and I think we have to be flexible. So, every decade or so, we're not the same people. We shouldn't be the same people. We didn't come this far to just come this far. We came this far to be different, right? To evolve and grow. So I hope that in 10 years, the visions that I have, or the purpose that I have, has evolved as I have. And so I hope that this is a lifelong process, I think, versus like it has all come to me and I have all the answers. And I think it's just an evolving, moving process. And I think that's just life, and a rich, to me, that is the byproduct of a quiet, rich, and vibrant inner life. And I think once we cultivate that, everything from the outside becomes part of that story or reflection.
That's so beautiful. Thank you.
Great question. Great answer. Ivor in Ohio, you're up.
Hello, Shivika, thank you very much. And Scott, thank you very much for introducing us. It's been fascinating. My question to you is, and this kind of along the lines of what's real versus what's categorized as greenwashing, or something that's just done for marketing, for kind of, social or environmental, et cetera, purposes. And I run a nonprofit, and I've been thinking for a while that I should start a kind of social venture and sell products that help the mission of the nonprofit. And, in light of what you talk about in terms of chocolate production and coffee, and there's some that are good and there's some that are bad. And from your international perspective, what resources or what ideas do you have for a product, that would be good to get into people's hands to collect revenue and money that then goes back to the people that really need it? And is there anything that you've seen recently that is just ripe for that and that we could help?
Yeah, I few, if I gosh, okay, please caveat this with, this is thoughts. I have done no research around this. I think we should run a competitive landscape analysis. But if I were to start something, with a social venture today, I think about women's supplement and health and wellness space. I think that is a space that needs to be thought through. I think a lot of the wellness products on the market today are not focused on the fact that women have a 30-day hormonal cycle and they reset every 30 days and men reset every 24 hours. So I think just supporting through that 30-day phase, whether that's a protein supplement that, it's got 4 different, I've thought about this, like 4 different packets or something that comes with it, or 4 different compartments, and you take it based on where you are in your cycle. So I think, women's health and wellness space, I think that protein idea, I think collagen for women, I think could be really powerful, is something I've thought about in the supplement and wellness space. I think a multivitamin for women that has ashwagandha or herbs that really balance out their hormones could be really powerful. We just don't really have that right now. We've got, regular multivitamins and everything else. So I think about that from a consumer standpoint. The other piece I think is ripe for disruption, or anything that's convenience related. I also think kids products are extremely ripe, full of plastic. I mean, there's just no way to take plastic out of childhood. It's just like not, two are not, they're basically synonymous. And I think, whether that's kids' toys, kids' clothing, I think that industry is going to see a shift as well.
Thank you very much. Great ideas.
Yeah.
Our cleanup hitter today, Tom, I don't know if you're trying to redeem yourself from the intro, or it's the excitement of the new job at Stanford, but you are our cleanup hitter today. Let's see what you got. And we can't hear you.
Speak louder.
Still.
Poor Tom is having such technical difficulties today.
Oh no, microphone issue.
No, not yet. Still.
You want to write it on a sheet of paper? You just hold it up.
Or chat it. And I can read it out.
All right. Unfortunately, I don't think Tom's going to get his question in. Shivika, I'm curious. So I'll jump in with a question. You clearly are an outlier. It's why I asked you if you join us. And when did you realize in life that you were probably different from other people? You saw the world a little bit differently. When was that kind of moment when you were like, "Oh yeah, I'm an outlier"?
First of all, thank you. I've never thought of myself as an outlier.
Oh, you're
And
a total outlier.
so honored.
Total outlier.
Well, thank you. I think it was probably, I went to a school, a new school, different country, basically the Himalayas of India, where I'm headed to next. I was in boarding school, and I was in boarding school with kids that were born and raised pretty much in India, or had come to that boarding school and had spent their, formative years there. And I think that was the first time I realized that, oh, what I've been through is not normal. And I was thinking about things that were just really beyond what they were thinking about. I also was deeply unchallenged in school. So I was terrible at high school, and I was really interested in the work and the philosophy, and I would do things in my own time, and I was kind of a rebel, and I think that was the first time when I realized, oh, not everyone has gone through the things I've gone through, things like me, and I tried very hard to fit in, I'd say, as all kids do, right? You want to be part of your social circle, you want to be accepted. And I think I think I realized as I've grown up that nature wants diversity. Nature and diversity, that is how nature thrives. And it's the same thing with the human race. Each of us are one of one. There's no two ways about that. And I think embracing our one of oneness and uniqueness and living our own great lives is really the way to go.
This has been such a joy, such a blessing to have you with us. The hour went by in like a blink of an eye. I cannot thank you enough. I think one of the cool things, and I always think this about you, is that you've done so many things, but you're so freaking young. It's like it's gonna be so much fun to kind of watch you navigate these next chapters in your life, because I don't even know if you know what they're gonna be. But you always do amazing things and you always inspire me. What can we do as a community to support you?
Oh my gosh. First of all, you've been so kind. Thank you. Yeah, I'd love to keep in touch and get to know all of you more. And, I would say that's it. Let's keep in touch. Let's connect on LinkedIn or over email. And I'm certainly will be closer part of the Outlier community. And yeah, let's just keep the conversation going. And this was just, I feel like, the first taste. I'm really excited about this community. I feel like we're all really like-minded and can have some amazing conversations for the next several years. So please keep in touch, and please let's keep the conversation going in our own ways. I'm in New York. I'm happy to grab coffee with anyone who's around, or jump on a call one-on-one down the line. So please do see me as a friend.
Awesome. Listen, safe travels. Thank you again for joining us. You're the best.
Thank you, guys. Thank all of you. Thank you so much for your time.
You got it. Thanks, Shivika.